This is a heart-touching story of Nicole Hughes of Tennessee. Listen to it and drown your heart with tender emotions. When Nicole took her children back to school shopping, she had bought only 2 backpacks instead of 3. Her oldest daughter, Lily, chose a green backpack without any childish characters. Although she was 10, she preferred to be 16. Her younger daughter, Reese, chose a purple backpack with a panda corn because she was 6 and preferred to be 6 forever. It is indeed sad that Nicole's son, Levi, who was supposed to be in pre-K at the same school as his sisters, will not be choosing a backpack. On June 10th, 2018, while on vacation at an Alabama beach, where they'd gone for enjoyment, Levi slipped away from them for a moment during a non-swim time, and he drowned. The bad luck was he had worn a life jacket or puddle jumper all day, but when they were cleaning up from dinner, he somehow got out of the room down a spiral staircase and fell into the pool. Unfortunately, Nicole did not know at the time that a child under 30 pounds can drown in 30 seconds, and that almost 70% of drowning occurs during a non-swim time. So when they went school shopping, there was no Paw Patrol backpack carried with pride throughout the Target store by a little boy so desperate to follow in his sister's footsteps. When Nicole hung their backpacks on the hooks by the garage door, there would be one hook that would be empty. Nicole was filled with agony when this thought came to her mind. Levi was supposed to be in pre-K at her daughter's school that year, where Nicole was a teacher. Incidentally, this was part of a plan that was made as soon as Nicole became pregnant with him, all 3 in the same school. There would be one drop-off and the same school schedule, and there would be plenty of stolen hugs in the hallway, holding hands as they walked out to the car line, and futile attempts by the adoring big sisters to calm the little brother, who would most definitely be running through the hallways. Nicole's family had been looking forward to this for years, but then the first day of school was approaching, and it was so very different than what they would have ever imagined. Nicole's 14 months of grief might seem short, but when one has to sit in the front row of their child's funeral, each day after that would be an eternity. She had discovered, as she navigated that journey, that the events she was prepared for had not been the hardest ones. She is braced and ready, almost daring the grief to hit her with full force on the anniversary days, or on each new first. Those are the moments she was not expecting that would knock her over. When she had let her guard down and would be slammed with the sudden realization that he was gone. The moments like moving the dresser and finding one of his tiny Thomas the Train toys, or when her daughter asked in the car, "Mom, how will we know what Levi expects from Santa this year? And how will we get those toys for him?" Those moments stabbed her heart with daggers that struck her suddenly without giving warning. They went back to school shopping, and she innocently thought she was ready, because she was prepared to experience the agony. She had navigated that torturous path already last year, and she was ready to face it with more confidence. But grief is ruthless, and it proved to her that she was wrong. Her daughters felt dizzy, choosing colorful folders and carefully marking off items on their lists. They walked around the store, her 6-year-old daughter grinning as she proudly carried her school supplies, tiny arms overflowing with Kleenex boxes and crayons. The sounds echoed around her, the rustling of supplies, the chatter, the thud of Lysol wipes and pencil boxes being tossed into the cart. But her head was swirling, and she had to gather all her strength to stand there for her daughters. When they were choosing school supplies, her mind tried to borrow even more grief from the future. She found herself already panicking as she thought about the actual first days of school. She will have to walk past the hallway with the pre-K room and physically feel the empty hole from Levi's absence. There will be no Levi name sign and a laminated name tag on the circle time rug. She shook her head and tried to focus on something other than the tragic grief that was staring at her. Last year, as they led up to those back-to-school days, she thought her sadness would stem from missing Levi. But back to school, she felt extra crushed. She quickly realized why. They were starting the first new season of life, the first in a lifetime of new ones ahead of them. They had lost Levi at the very beginning of summer, but then fall beckoned and he was still not back. The beginning of each new season since then had been painful, not only because she missed her son, but also because each transition reminded her that the loss of Levi was something permanent. 1 year had passed. They survived Halloween without him. His Christmas stocking went unopened. He did not pick out Valentines with candy attached in February. His first birthday and even the first anniversary of his death had passed. They had somehow survived all of them, their hearts desperately missing a little boy, but they had an equal amount of desperation to give their daughters the childhood they deserved. So they lived those parallel lines of grieving over the loss of their boy while celebrating his sister's happy occasions. Most of the days apparently appeared to be normal. She parented and did laundry, solved sibling fights, shuffled to dance class and softball games. But at some moments, she was filled with anger at the unfairness of that tragedy. The abyss of the darkness, that magnetic force of grief and bitterness, pulled her with great force. The darkness was readily waiting to pounce at the weakest moments. Grief is messy and complicated, but one part of which she was clinging to, above all else, was that if one chooses to see the light and goodness, he or she will find it. As she stood in that Target aisle, she looked at her older daughters. They were not just surviving, but they were thriving. 14 months ago, they stood on the edge of the balcony and watched the world end, watched as their parents begged to trade places with their little brother. Nicole and her husband had fought each other like hell every single day since then to make sure they didn't lose them as well. Their family, friends and daughters, teachers, had shown up often. They would never have survived that past year without the care and concern of every single person who had helped them carry the pieces of their shattered hearts. There was so much good in the affection and love that those beautiful people showered on their lives. And it was definitely working. Their daughters were living full and happy lives. Nicole could not fathom why she had to lose Levi, how the sudden death of a 3-year-old could ever be a part of any plan. Yet, every day, she chose to see the goodness that still existed. When school started, she was supposed to have a little boy walking into the classroom, shooting sneaky glances back at her, proudly hanging his Paw Patrol backpack on the hook in the cubby marked Levi. Her little mama's boy was supposed to cling to her leg until she left, then throw a massive fit. His teacher was supposed to have to get Lily from her 5th grade class, his treasured Lily. She would pull him into her lap, dry his tears, and whisper promises of candy and slime making as soon as school was out. He was supposed to pass Reese in the hall, on the way to the library in Spanish, giggling in delight at that marvel of seeing each other at school. She very well knew that that was what was supposed to happen, because they'd been planning it for years. Nicole desperately wished she had known the real truth about drowning before June 10, 2018. That it took a few seconds, and often it happens when a child slips out during a non-swim time. She wanted nothing more to add to her story, since there will be nothing else except sadness, anger, and missed milestones. But at the same time, there will also be a purpose and its meaning. In addition, laughter and relationships as well, like 1st grade reading and 5th grade fractions. Each day without Levi turned out to be something impossible to accept. Grief will never stop following Nicole. She knew it would never stop trying to suffocate her with its darkness. When Nicole tried to imagine spending days, months, and years, then a life without Levi, she felt paralyzed. But she was acutely aware that her present choices determined her future. So, she chose to breathe, to advocate, and to create meaning out of that devastating loss. Grief is no doubt extremely powerful, but Nicole chose to believe that the beauty in the midst of that tragedy is even stronger. Guys, Levi had left gentle footprints in our hearts, a memory that cannot be wiped off. The story of Levi has an important purpose as well, spreading awareness of prevention of death of a child by drowning. Please, share the story and pull the strings of tender emotions that rule every heart.